All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
We have a physiologist and a historian talking about Wheel of Time because
Yeah, sure, why not?
because things.
Well,
Well, it was written
and
by a physicist, so
we
we're covering the gamut.
we start on a Rand chapter, so I've got my "You're Killing Me" small shirt on. That seemed appropriate for, for where Rand is here. Um,
Well, and I've got my Under Armour shirt on because I rolled in straight from work, but at the same time, I've been seeing these memes about it's the old dad thing to wear Under Armour shirts now. When did that happen? It's like that's like an athlete
I
thing.
don't know.
What? Uh,
I understood that with like some of the tap out and some of the other UFC related gear that's been around for a while. And you remember when UFC was first starting, we would go rent the VHSs to watch them. So we're old.
yeah, but you know what? Us in the actual fighter gyms were maybe it was a little bit of jealousy because we were all small time at the time, but you would go to like a sports club or whatever to watch a pay-per-view and you're like, oh, here comes the affliction shirts, and it's always the D bag, that comes in
Afflictions,
there.
that's the other one. Yeah, I
And there was a
remember there was a
stereotype with it.
brand that was worse. Yeah, there was a stereotype that was worse than Tap Out, and I couldn't remember the name of it. And it was Affliction.
But the problem was the tap out guys actually did so much for the sport that you have to respect
Hmm.
them. That sport never would have
Hmm.
taken off without the tap out guys.
Yeah, I remember watching a documentary on the UFC a while ago, and the Tap Out guys were in it because I didn't realize that how low they started. It's a pretty impressive story. It's a great American small business story of they just loaded stuff merch up in a van and just drove to the parking lot of wherever the UFC number, way back in number like 3 or 4, I think is where they started. So
And even when they barely
anyway,
had the money to do it, they would be sponsoring fighters and trying
yeah,
to get them to, which was
yeah.
the only way when these guys weren't getting paid way back when. Even the headliners, it was maybe a couple $1,000s tops.
Hmm. Hmm. And that was when it was a tournament, so you were fighting multiple times in a night.
Hmm.
If you won, you fought again.
And a lot of
So
the shows I went to, it was we'll pay for your hotel room.
hey, that's something.
Yep.
All right. Um, back on topic. You're killing me, Smalls. Speaking of Rand, um, first comment we got from last time, Rand is carrying justice. The text makes it very clear. I wouldn't say very. That's you can certainly get there from the text. It's just written really awkwardly. And I think this is related to the last comment here from Scott about Naomi, that this is kind of a
Which is supposed
hallmark
to be
of
Nakomi, right?
um
Because he said something about autocorrect.
no, I think that was relating to a comment from last time that we made fun of him because the name, I don't remember which name was off, but Sanderson, I think I said this last time. I know I've thought it before that he's kind of the fantasy book version of M. Night Shyamalan. Um, he loves to have little twists and hidden little nuggets, hidden little details. Um, like the good Shyamalan, when you go back and you rewatch The Sixth Sense, knowing how it ends, you see the details and you go, ah, okay, um, I get it. So it's more than just the twist reveal. There are these little nuggets sprinkled throughout the movie, and when it works, it's really good. The problem is sometimes it just comes off as cryptic or confusing. And like I said, I had to reread that brief little section a couple of times when I first read it and go, wait, what? Huh? New sword? What? Wait, where's the one that he got from Avienda? I'm confused. Did I forget what happened there? And
Hmm.
and so once I had reread it a couple of times, I'm pretty sure I got that in the moment because it is pretty clear in the text that he's thinking about the Great Hunt. He's thinking about what happened there, and then you can infer what the sword is. And that is, I am 99.9% sure that that is the same with Naomi. We'll get to when we get to it. I think it's in this book, but it may be early in the next book. And it's I have read from multiple posts that that character and that scene was an invention of Sanderson. Um, but I don't recall if I have heard him say that. So that's why I'll leave that little bit of wiggle room for me.
Okay, so I was looking at our notifications, and one of the comments that's on our notifications is actually from way back. It's from a Fires of Heaven episode, and it's our new
Mm.
subscriber. So we'll have to really be careful of the spoilers because it's a first time reader. And it, I guess they changed their username, but their original was ideals are isomorphic, which I loved, and they changed it to something else. But uh, I've just
That's
finished
cool.
Fires of Heaven and haven't watched. I'm assuming watched was the show, so I'm inserting words there. Yet, but pretty sure since the laser beam that killed Robin was thick as fuck, thick spelled with two C's and fuck spelled with two C's. It has also somehow reversed the deaths of Lanfear,
Oh
Moraine,
yeah.
because okay, so this is a first time reader, and there's
Mm.
spoilers in that, even where we are now. So
That that is an interesting thought, and I'd never heard anyone, because I'm trying to think what the connection there would be. So, new subscriber, thank you for subscribing. And if you're watching this one, or whenever you get around to this one, when you catch up, I'm wondering what the connection between their deaths and Ravine. What connection are you making there? Because that's really all I can say to think to respond to that without getting into spoiler territory. So that is an interesting thought, because we do see the yeah, the thick AF. We do see the immediate um results of that there when Rand comes out of Teleron and sees that Matt and Avienda and poor frickin' Pevin, uh the guy who was basically broken from having his family killed or taken Guy Shane by the Shido, and he never speaks, and he's got this vacant expression on his face all the time. And the one time he has an expression, it's he got brought back to life by the giant bar of balefire, only to then get an Aiel a Trolloc spear through his chest, and then get killed again. Um, which
yeah,
I thought was
in
a
a much more painful way too.
yeah. And which I thought, at the moment, it's such a great little thing. From just the details that make Jordan so good and so infinitely rereadable is those details that really draw you in. I mean, again, he never spoke. You got a few sentences here and there from his backstory, from Rand's point of view, of Rand looking at him, Rand thinking about him as he's the one who's just, took up the banner, basically volunteered to carry that banner. And then boom, he's gone, and in pretty tragic fashion, with that these other people had come back. But it's also, again, so many scenes are doing more things than once, and it's, Jordan planting there, and our main protagonist Rand seeing, you know, this isn't a
This
rewind button.
this is
S still
Pevin.
happens.
We don't need sound, I don't think. I'm free.
Oh, I'd forgotten all about that. I've only ever saw that movie once. Um, all right, so new subscriber, welcome. And when you catch up to this point, or Sam wants to actually, you should make a comment actually
Yeah,
on a
I will
reply
make a
on his
comment.
comment
Yeah.
of what's the connection there that made you think that? Because that's interesting to me. I don't think I've ever heard anyone have expressed that thought, because for a very long time, because that happens at the end of book 5, you know, and here we are on 12. Um, sorry, I got sidetracked. 80s montage style. My wife is trying on dresses, and what was I saying? Where
Yeah.
where am where am I? What's going on? Um, so there's a lot of speculation on, and because of something where we see in we saw in the first couple of chapters, and I think Rand makes a reference to it here as well when he's thinking about Moiraine, is Min doubting her powers now because she had a vision about Moiraine that can't be true because Moiraine is dead. And so there was a lot of speculation of, okay, well, obviously she's not dead, but how? So for a very long time, there were, you know, how is it possible? What happened? Blah, 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 blah. And that's a new one. All right. So getting to the actual chapters, because I got a hard out because I got to try and get um got to try and get on the road and get down there for the big game. Shut up, NFL. Uh, and shenanigans. So right off the bat, though, I have to start on a low note, and I hate to do that. We've got a sea folk symbol here as our iconography for chapter 5. And Hareen is going to show up to resume her post as ambassador of the sea folk to Rand. And it reminded me when I was going through this of how big a deal the capital B was, the bargain.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I don't know if this was I really am curious, was this purposeful on Jordan's part? Because we know there are, in fact, that's one of my points here in this chapter is uh I'm probably going to be skipping around here a little bit, but one of Jordan's points, and he made this point several times in Q&As when fans would ask him about this or that thing, and he revealed at times that, especially later, as more there became more and more plot threads of, look, some of these threads aren't going to be tied off because that's life, because life is confusing and messy. Life is uncertain. Uh, you know, so much of what we think we know, we only think we know it. And yet, I mean, we were just talking about this Wednesday of, hold on a second, for decades, the medical community has been telling you this thing about these particular sets of drugs, but in actuality, yeah, well,
YouTube, we're
we
talking
weren't
about
as certain as,
SSRIs.
yeah, yeah, we weren't as certain as we thought we were,
Oh, and by
or
the
we
way,
weren't as certain as we said.
if you're seeing this and next week is a little late, it's because I have not posted that yet. It's actually still rendering on the in the video editing.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna put 1 and 2 up from Wednesday. Then I'm gonna put this one up, and then I'll put 1 and 3 up from Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
Then put part 2, which is the part that might get us canceled, up as
Yeah.
soon as this one is up. So you'll still get this week. But
Yeah.
if we do get a strike for that middle part,
Yeah. We
then
wanted to make
next
sure we
week's
got
will have
this
to be a day
episode
late
up. Yeah.
because we'll get the 7-day ban. But
Yeah. Um, and that is, it's so easy to illustrate that point because in our modern world, I mean, even when Jordan first started writing these, which was in the late 80s, you know, we were still a very connected world. And now, you know, relative to where we were in the late 80s, we're basically the Matrix now. That's how far we've jumped as far as connectivity and access to information. And even still, you know, tread on thin ice here is, we haven't talked about Ukraine in a while, in large part because when it first started happening, you know, our point was, we don't really know what the hell is going on there. The news is breathlessly, reporting on these things as absolute fact, and the war, the fog of war is real there, and how much more so here, where you don't have printing presses, you don't have instant communication. Um,
You know, you bring up you brought up the printing press, and that's actually it actually makes me think of all the things that Jordan put in for the academies. He never hints at a printing press.
no, no, there is one.
Oh, was there?
Um, Early on, I think it's before. I think it's before Herod Fell gets killed. It's one of his first visits to, but it's a blink and you'll miss it offhand remark about a printing press. And reading between the lines, I read that as the Gutenberg press, which was the big, revolution in printing. Um, so somebody is working on it, but when Gutenberg, one of the reasons the Gutenberg Bible and the Gutenberg Press was able to take off the way it did is because it happened at a time of relative, there was always something going on, but relative peace in Europe. And right now you're in the middle of Ragnarok. So it's kind of hard for these things to spread. And you see, actually, we saw at the end of the last book, one of those actually coming into um use, which was the steam wagon.
Hmm.
Which I think is funny, is they've kind of invented the train before the steamship. Which was where the steam engine really took off in our world, is it on water first, because it was easier. Someone
Hmm.
figured out that was a lot easier than trying to move something on land. But it makes sense, and I'd never thought of this consciously before, but it makes sense that is kind of the first thing that was hinted at in those early trips to the school. It would make sense that necessity is the mother of invention, and that is a big effing deal now. Whereas the printing press, all right, well, that's nice, but we're kind of busy literally trying to stay alive.
Yeah, that's true.
And it is hard for, and I would say, though, well, the printing press would be, frankly, especially with gateways, the printing press would actually be more useful to fighting the last battle than the steam wagon would. Because how often, and I mean, for crying out loud, some of our episodes are memes on so many of the problems that occur, so many of the conflicts, both between people and between groups and between nations. It's a lack of information.
Mhm.
Just how hard is it to disseminate information? And that is, again, I'm kind of jumping around here in chapter 5, is one of the things that is reinforced here is the taint on Sidon. Um, oh, did I jump around too much? That's not the next chapter, is it? Because it another thing that happens here is that the chapters are broken up more frequently. And I made this point last time, is because basically these three books are basically the last half dozen chapters of a book. These three books are to the series, because the last half dozen or so chapters in every one of Jordan's books, he starts jumping perspectives quicker and quicker, because it's all these threads coming together for the climax. And that's the whole of these three books, because it's one big long climax giggity. So he's bouncing around in chapter, and he switches perspectives, two or more times inside a chapter. Um, so where is it? Where is it where he? I was pretty sure it was this one because of the sea folk thing. Yeah, where Rand asks Hareen, "What do you do with men who can channel?" And she tells him, and it's not pleasant, as these things are. but at least but in a lot of ways it's more sympathetic. It's a well, not in a lot of ways. At least they're given a choice. The guys in Rand's world, they don't even have the choice of, all right, well, you can drown yourself or you can go on an island with no food or water and you can live out a little bit longer, see how that works for you. But he's rightly emphatic that it's not, it's cleansed. You need to stop this. You need to let your
Hmm.
people know you have to stop this. But you know, well, obviously we believe you because you're the dragon, and it would be, as Elsa puts it, it would be improper for me to contradict you. That's not exactly a glowing endorsement, you know. Uh, and and what is it that I like the way Carell, because she's bonded to Flynn, so she's wielded it. Um, and because of the flows, she would be able to see just how much and feel how much power they were doing. So on page 104, we were both there at Shadar Logoth, Carell said. We saw what you did, Rand. Um, Besides, I can feel male power through Dear Dammer. I love the little, again, the little things. Dear Dammer. That's, just I sound like a dork saying it, but there's no other way to describe it as that's adorable. It's like it's like seeing an elderly couple walking along still holding hands, is what that makes me think of.
Oh, so you're right there with Travis Kelsey and being sad that he couldn't give her a bracelet before she left for her tour.
Wait, does that mean she's not going to be at the Super Bowl?
Oh no, this was way back when this was
Crap.
new. It was on his little
All right.
podcast. I couldn't give her this friendship bracelet.
All right.
I wish I was
Um,
making this shit up, but
it has changed. The taint is gone, right as sunlight it is. Though channeling the male half still feels like wrestling with a summer whirlwind. So this is one of the parts. I'm not saying, it's not up there as one of the great favorite scenes, that I've talked about, but I do love this moment because it is so illustrative of this theme that Jordan employs a lot. I mean, we've talked about the basic foundation of the story is it's the chosen one trope, but then turned on its head. There's this almost dark twist to it of nobody is everyone is dreading his coming, and there
mm,
are plenty of people who think he's actually the bad guy, and he himself loathes the fact that he's the chosen one. So there is no trumpet sound, and I've referenced Excalibur a lot because it uses the lore of the Fisher King. You literally see it, and there's that point at the climax of the movie where Arthur is finally roused to action, and he puts on his armor and he goes riding through, and the countryside is literally turning green as he rides past. Um, because it is showing you this myth, this legend. What Jordan is trying to do is show you this is the real world, quote unquote, where that myth and legend comes from, and it's a lot messier. It's great to have. I don't remember who I heard talking about this recently about another uh, uh, another set of fiction where it doesn't just turn on a dime. It's all great and good to that in the movies, you know Mr. Smith goes to Washington and gives his rousing speech, and then and then that's enough to, you know, let the good guys win and the bad guys, get thrown out of office or thrown in jail, and yay, everybody claps, or at the end of the action movie, there's a big boom and haha, the good guys have won. And yeah, it's a lot uglier than that. It doesn't work that way. And when you try and part of Rand's psychosis, I think, is what you see here when he's thinking about this and he's talking about this out loud, and he so desperately wants this to be like a Gleeman's Tale, and the fact that it's not, I think, is part of what is driving his madness.
It's an example of what I think of as the second most powerful emotion we have: frustration. You want to see frustration in action, get on a 2-lane freeway and be in the flow of traffic and watch how people drive. And then when you get up to that where two semis, one is passing the other one at maybe a quarter of a mile per hour faster, and everybody gets
I-45, I
backed
hate
up.
you so much. Yeah.
Everybody gets backed up. Look at those exact same people flip a switch and they drive completely differently. That's the power of frustration,
Mm-hmm.
because they're in a 2,000-pound
Mm-hmm.
death machine and they
Mm-hmm.
start weaving in and out with their little baby in the back seat, right?
And all of a sudden they start driving like they're at Daytona. And
And flipping each
dude,
other
you are
off
not.
and
Yeah.
road raging, and all it was a little slowdown. Frustration, I call the second most powerful emotion. Fear is the first. Fear is always the
Mm,
first. But both of those lead to aggression.
mm.
And so Rand is super frustrated. And he's a kind of a boiling pot ready to burst at the same time. So he's been a ball of frustration for the last 7 books now. Once he accepted the fact that he was the Dragon Reborn and he's going to be this emperor, and he needs to try to find a way to bring everything together, his main emotion, we all say anger. No, anger is a result of the
That's a good point.
frustration. Now, in the first 3 books, it was fear. That was the first emotion with him.
No, that's a really good point, especially your point about once he finally accepted, because he's already starting to kind of go mad in the Dragon Reborn. And we only see brief glimpses of him, and he's manic is what he is. And there's a
Well, he's
part of
also, but
him.
he's afraid. And he's reactionary to that afraid. But then when he
But there's also
accepts
a
it, he
big
kind of
part of
gets in a
him.
lull until frustration just builds and
I,
builds
I
and
I think a
builds.
big part of his initial frustration that you start to see in the Shadow Rising is that there's a there's a pretty big part of him, when you get to see inside his head in the Dragon Reborn, in those brief scenes where he's on his own and he's running to Tyr. There's a significant part of him that is really hoping he's going to die,
Mm-hmm.
that he's going to die at Tyr, that he's going to show that he's not really the dragon, and he's going to show that by being killed. And
Well,
I
we
think
talk
the start of his frustration is the fact that he didn't.
well, we talk about Big Brain Sapolsky a lot. The opening to his "Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers" is something to the extent of, the great thing about being human is we're all going to die and we know it.
Hmm.
Is what separates us from the other animals, and is our biggest source of anxiety and stress is we're all going to die and we know it, and he just knows
That,
it in a
that's
different way.
that's one of the first things Loyal says. Is he says something very similar. And again, back to, did Jordan know these things, or
Yeah,
did he
Loyal says
intuit these
something about
things?
the short
But
lifespan of humans is
yeah,
why they're
but
so
look at what you
manic.
do. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But look at what you do with that. We just sit in our steadings, and we tend our groves, and we think, and we have long conversations. But look at what you guys get done. And he's in awe of it. That's why he wanted to go outside.
But onto the frustration with the sea folk, what Rand realized as he started to become a ruler and trying to unite people was that so many people are so different and set in their ways. And this is just
Hmm.
another example that becoming the Karn, he's like, oh, I'm going to be the chief. Everybody's going to follow me. And they're like, it doesn't quite work like that.
Yeah.
Oh, the
Yeah.
Coromor, well, we're going to do this and it's going to happen. No, no, we got this whole bargaining shtick, you know. Oh, I rule tier. Oh, we have our kind of ways of doing things. Karhine, oh, we kind of got our ways of doing things, and you need to be in this box. And he's like, but I'm the rule. We can all get together. And he's so frustrated. But what he can't see is
Hmm.
if someone had come to him in the Two Rivers with a new way of doing things, he would have been
Yeah.
just as stubborn.
Yeah. Absolutely. In fact, we get a little when we switch to Nynaeve's perspective, we actually get a little bit of that idea
Uh,
from her
bef- just let
perspective.
me know when you're switched because I wanted to bring up something on page 105, just kind of a meta thought when he's
Yeah,
talking to
go ahead
Flynn there. Yeah.
because we're
We
about to switch to Cadsuane and Simirhaj.
when he's talking to Flynn, let's see, the people of the camp, he says he's jealous of, or he envies them, right? And Flynn is confused. He says they
Hmm.
do as they're told, they work every day, do orders, strict orders at times, but orders are not, those people are more free than I am. And so go to part 3 of the episodes I'm going to put up before this. We talk about this a little bit. The term free will versus individual will. Flynn brings up the point that he knows Saldaeans. They won't. They can't.
Hmm. Hmm.
Or they won't do it, and that's part of the whole free will is they're making their decision, but it's based on their culture, it's based on how they were raised, and
And
all of
Rand's
these things.
response is they
They
won't, but they
could,
could.
they
Yeah.
could, they have individual will, they have that freedom, so it's not necessarily what they would do or whatever, it's the fact that they can. But me, I'm tied to this fate.
And part of Rand's mental state is the fact that he can't recognize or won't recognize that, well, no, you could too. The consequences would be disastrous for the entire world, so you won't. It is the exact same as those Saldeans. Those Saldeans are bound by honor and duty, to Flynn's point, so they won't, but they could.
And it's
You are
actually
also bound
and it's
by honor and
actually
duty.
yeah, it's actually a very it's an extreme point that you can even see on a smaller level. You were just talking about your wife changing or whatever. If you said, "Hey honey, can you get me a glass of water?" She would go get you a glass of water. But if you said, "Hey, glass of water now," you would get a different response, right? And he's in that point mentally where it's like, okay, so I could be the good guy and save the world because I have these abilities. That would be one response. But I'm fated to do this and die.
Mm.
And if I don't do this, the whole world ends.
Since you haven't posted it yet, exactly, you should reiterate your thought from Wednesday about free will, because I think you just like that was a eureka moment that I've never heard from anyone else, and we need to boost the signal here is because if you say I have no free will, I am immediately reflexively going to fight against you, because what you are saying is you're a prisoner, you're a slave. You
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
Nobody
okay,
wants
so
that.
yeah, so just to kind of paraphrase probably about 10 minutes of conversation we had is I think the terminology is what's getting in the way of the argument. I coined a term and we might be able to even fine tune that. I said let's call it individual will. Because as soon as I say you don't have any free will, you're thinking you're controlled by something. When the people who argue for no free will are actually talking about, well, it's everything that led up to where you are that determines the next move you make. So even though you say, I
Mhm.
made this decision, well, it's based on your genetics. It's based on what you ate that day. It's based on the environment around you at the time and all of these things. So free isn't like just I sprung this thing out of nothingness and it became something. Whereas individual, you can account for all of those things because nobody is the you are in that moment. And so the decision you made is still uniquely you. And so if you unless someone else is controlling your decision, then you did have free will because you as the individual still made that decision. And that's why I think terminology is one of the things that's getting people's backs up. You say, oh, there is no
Mhm.
free will because it's determined. Well, I mean, that's like saying, everything happens for a reason. That's the conundrum. Everything happens for a reason, but I have free will. Well, no, because there's 7.6 billion people in the world, and if you had free will, then not everything could happen for a reason, because you would disrupt 7.5999999, billion people, their decisions, because what you did affected their life. So
Hmm.
it free will, I think, would be best with individual will. And what Rand is saying here is, I have no choice.
Hmm.
Outside forces, which is fate, is determining my course, whereas that person can go get on a farm somewhere. If I succeed, they're going to be happy. If I fail, they're going to die anyways. So
But
it's
back to this specific example for this idea is, and what is driving Rand so crazy is that the box. He's in the box, and think about how often since Lord of Chaos that thought came up, and he thinks about the box as a metaphor, and it, and he,
and what's the important thing about the
uh
box? It's not control,
it's the confinement.
isolation. He is in this discussion with Flynn. He is saying he is different than everybody because he's the only one that has no control.
Hmm.
But realistically, everybody is tied to the same fates. He's just the
Right.
biggest figure in
And
it.
so I think in Rand's mind, uh I think why he's saying that is because, well, they're not Tavarin. So if that random Saldean soldier jumped on his horse and just rode off into the middle of the nowhere to just wait out the last battle and see what happens, because he doesn't want to have to deal with this, he's not going to have the pattern weaving him back into the last battle. I'll still have the pattern, but we've seen before where the pattern has been nudging Rand, and he's tried to go another way. Or same thing with Matt and Perrin. That random Saldean soldier is still going to have to deal with the guilt. He's
Mhm.
still going to have to deal with the thought. And
Or
what is
or
that if not the pattern nudging him back to the last battle?
or add into it, Rand's influence of the pattern is why the guy's there in the to begin
Yeah. So how much freedom does
with
he
no
really
thought
have?
of leaving. Yeah.
So so if you're confined, if you're bound, as you say you are, then how is that guy also not bound because you're here? If what you're saying is true, then nobody has any free will, and this is all, a machine marching towards an inevitable end.
Which is
And
funny
and
because
and
it's these same internal thoughts that are leading us to, we're all in this together,
mm-hmm,
that led Ishii to be a nihilist.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because
No, that's a good
he
point.
looked at the exact same data and said, "What's the point? Let's
Yeah,
break it all."
yeah. Oh, that is it. That is a put a pin in that and keep an eye on it, because this isn't a spoiler, because you expect that the good guys are going to win in the end, or else you're going to be kind of pissed for having spent 13 or 14 books, uh 14 books, you know, going to an end of what the hell was that, which anyone who's played Mass Effect, you know how that feels. Um
Or watch The Sopranos
at, oh yeah. So at some point here,
or Game of
Rand
Thrones.
is go- at some point here, Rand is going to learn laughter and tears, and obviously Ishii is not. So Ishii is still going to be the nihilist antagonist, and so put a pin in what you just said, and keep an eye on that here as we see where Rand hits rock bottom, and then how he gets out of that, and what he becomes after that. It is, I want to keep an eye on when we get there, because I can't remember from my last readings. I can't remember how I felt about those scenes, and how much they were Sanderson and how much they were Jordan. And more than the events that we wish, I won't go too far into it in case, because some of them are still spoilery, that we've talked about a lot, that happen at the end, these events that we wish Jordan would have been around to write, and we think write better than what Sanderson did. To me, the more important ones that make it bittersweet for me that Jordan didn't get to finish is those character moments, like when Rand hits rock bottom and then when he gets out of it. I really would have loved to see how Jordan himself wrote those moments, because more than just these events, I mean, that's the entirety of what we've been working up to since we first got inside Rand's mind in chapter 1 of Eye of the World. We've been slowly building to this. All right, moving along before we get bogged down even further. Um, I don't really have any thoughts about the next section. Um, I do love the way, um, I don't know, and again, I don't know how much of this is Sanderson, how much of it's Jordan, this particular section, but it's great. Um, I'd be curious to ask Sanderson sometime about some of the minor characters, because I know he's talked about the major characters of getting their voice right. But I haven't seen anyone ask him about the minor characters, and Cadsuane here is great. You know, either he had a great grasp of her voice and this character, or else Jordan had a major hand in this section here. Um,
Talking about Simmerage.
because uh, yeah, but it's from Cadsuane's point of view,
Mm-hmm.
and so being inside her head and the thought process and the build up and uh the realization when you finally get to the end of the chapter of, well, wait a minute, she starts off annoyed that the boy won't let them get brutal with Simmerhaj, and then by the end of the chapter she's, well, wait a minute, Simmerhaj, that wouldn't work anyway. That
Mm-hmm.
this person has made a lifetime out of an obsession with pain and agony and death. What would hurting her do anyway? And then I love the where Cadsuane leaves off, which is the more she thinks about it, the more she sees herself in Simmerhaj. That Simmerhaj is the dark version of her, and that alone is shocking. But then that leads to the big kind of shocking revelation she has of, well, how would I break myself? And I love that self realization,
Mm-hmm.
and that, for all of her flaws, this is why Cadsuane one is able to get to Rand and get his attention and get him to shift, you know, even despite her flaws. And we've complained before about what these are her blind spots, but seeing her thought process, you see how she has much narrower and fewer blind spots than other Aes Sedai, and you see here why.
Well,
Because you see that self-awareness and that intellectual honesty and curiosity.
and not to give away the punchline, but she realized that they're torturing a woman, and they're torturing her like she's a man. More pain, more pain, more pain. But how do women fight versus how do men fight? That's the key there.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that about that component of it as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thought I had about this chapter or this section when I was reading it was the other reason I had I wonder who wrote how much of this section chapter was, dude, one of you guys is really dark, because the example that is given, and the first thing that popped into my head when I was reading Simmerhush talking about replacing all of someone's blood with another substance. Holy crap. That is that is horrifying and incredibly twisted. That's taking the fear of alien, that idea that there's something inside you.
Mm-hmm.
That's taking that fear and turning it up to 11, because it's not just a bug, an alien trying to burst out of you. It's something you are feeling in every capillary.
I'm gonna
And the
say
first
this
thing
is
to pop into my head,
I'm gonna say this is probably Sanderson because so much with Simraj and just like uh situations like that, Rand, oh not Rand, Jordan
Jordan.
did the rats and figs with us. He
Exactly.
he would
The
just
mice
leave.
and
He would
figs
just
was the
kind of
first thing to
bring,
pop in my mind
yeah,
here.
he would just
Hmm.
bring up something like, oh, she's responsible for this, and it is up to your imagination to put together what she did to get that.
Hmm.
And this is more overt. This is more, I did this to this person.
Yeah. So if the figs and mice were to make you spin out of control in your own head of worst case scenarios, and you're actually going to articulate a specific worst case scenario, ye gads, how much worse could it possibly get?
Yeah. Well, in this, it's funny because now everybody reflect on yourselves who's read these books. Take those vague things and then think about what you put in it. Now you know what's in
Yeah.
your head.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, chapter 6. Um we had mentioned when we saw the blurb of this battle that we're now seeing the aftermath of, with Rodel Iteralde, of, you know, even with surprise, you're going to suffer some serious losses because of the Domine. And I had thought that it did get specific with that, and yeah, he lost half of his men, and he had a huge army, because this is the point now where those scattered bands of raiders have now come back together to form a single army. He's got 100,000 men. That is a gargantuan number, and he lost 50,000 or close to it. And he's thinking, you know, to really drive the point home, we don't need to see it. We need to feel it. And so Jordan slash Sanderson does that by, we don't need to see the battle. We just see it out of Rodell's eyes and feel what he's feeling of, my gosh, I lost 50,000 men, and in any other battle that would be an absolute disgrace, and I would be horrified, and I'm breathing a sigh of relief that that's all I lost.
Mm-hmm.
And in large part, one, not just that I was outnumbered, but that the Domine, the amount of damage they did to me. Um, and then I love this moment with the uh with the Sanchin general, who's telling him you can't possibly win, and then he realizes, oh, you know it. So why are you fighting? Why did you? He has the thought of, once the trap was sprung, this guy, and you see in their exchange, this guy was no slouch. This was no, political appointee. This guy knew his stuff. And so Iturralde thinks he must have known as soon as the trap was sprung, I'm done. I'm dead. I'm going to lose. But you fought anyway. Why? As what how does Iturralde phrase it? Why does a crow fly?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um any thoughts on that? When then we have a short scene from Egwene.
No, I think you touched.
Who's the
I think
spider web?
that would should be
I would
Mughidian.
assume that would be Moghidian, but she has nothing to do with this chapter.
Oh, what
So,
did they call? Oh, he's the wolf. I was gonna say Etheralde.
mhm.
Yeah, that's a good question. We don't get any Moghedian in here.
No. Hmm. Well, I'll look that up. See if I can look that up later. If someone knows, just go ahead and let us know. But I'm not sure who the spider web is and why that's the icon of this chapter. Um, I also love the title "When Iron Melts." I assumed that we were going to get more Rand in this chapter, and we
Mm-hmm.
actually don't. It's more literal
Yeah, it's not time for
of
that
when iron
yet.
melts. Yeah, yeah. and then we um we switch to Egwene, and the weird bubble of evil where stuff starts turning to like wax. Um and here is where Egwene um is ahead of Rand, because to your point of, you know, people are still people. They still have their own agendas. They still have their own biases. They still are looking out their own personal Overton window. Uh, Egwene gets that, but of course, where she's still a person, and so she is still dealing with what is driving Rand crazy, which is that frustration. Because on page 118, you know,
Well, and it's the same
she
frustration because
gets
Rand is saying, why won't all these people come together to fight the ultimate evil?
yes,
And she's saying, why won't these two parts of the tower come together to fight the ultimate evil?
but where she's slightly ahead is Rand is just infuriated with them. Egwene is able to see why they won't. She's still frustrated because she knows she has to get them to open their eyes and have that epiphany of, you need to break with what is holding you on to your, you know, what seem like big important things, but ultimately right now are petty, because they are not the existential crisis we're looking at. It is uh, um, these sorts of events are more frequent, Egwene said calmly, glancing at the two yellows. The Dark One is getting stronger. The last battle approaches. What is your Amarillion doing about it? So she knows she has to get that. This is what needs to be done. This is why these people aren't waking up to see the bigger picture. But she still is frustrated, and she is still, not perfect at figuring out how to get them to see this.
Okay, quick pause. Okay, sorry for the hiccup. One thing I wanted to say about the parallel of Egwene and Rand that actually is working here too is it's a mix of competence and stubbornness for both of them. It's not
Mm,
just why won't these people come together? Part of the friction in coming together is the extension to that statement of why won't these people come together under me?
yes.
Because Egwene could have
Yeah,
given
that's
up a long time ago and let the tower reintegrate, and the simps on the rebellion side would have made it happen.
exactly. And that was one of my thoughts, both with Rand and Egwene. And Egwene makes the better example of, well, you need to, walk a mile in another man's moccasins and see that, yeah, their response would be yes. So we should be united behind us.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. So why are you still opposing us? So it's not enough just to you know open someone's eyes to this thing, to either seeing this thing or seeing this thing the way you do. You also have to convince them that your solution is the better solution. And um that's where Grant Gwaine is still flawed. And I was thinking, as I was refilling my water for my poor throat here, that I don't know that we're going to have much spoiler talk here, not just for this episode, but going forward, because there's almost no reason to, because so many of the things that would be spoiler talk are, well, we're about to get there, so we might as well just keep going. And so with the culmination of Egwene's story here, with the White Tower schism, is you have to show, you can't tell. And that's ultimately what Egwene ends up doing, is showing rather than telling. There comes a time where talking is done. And now we have to, we you know Super Bowl analogy, because here we are in a couple of days. We can prognosticate all we want, we can break down the X's and O's all you want, but okay, then at the end of it, we got to play the game and let's just
Mm,
see what happens.
yeah. Uh, well, and I think where one of the differences in this parallel too is not only Egwene is further from the box than Rand is, but it's their position in trying to fix the problem. Egwene has no choice but to be intelligent about it and to use manipulation
Mm.
and example and all of these things to try because she's in a very low status position. She's a prisoner. She's a novice. She has no choice but to think this through, and she is forced to do it the right way. Where Rand is like, I should just be able to squeeze, and juice should come
I, I
out.
just thought of a I just thought of a good and really insulting analogy. Uh, Egwene is Tom Brady. Rand is Cam Newton.
Cam Newton when he played for the Patriots, or good Cam Newton when he was a Panther.
No, I meant um, Cam Newton when he was good, but then why he couldn't become Tom Brady because it's here you are you're the man because you've got all these accolades, you've got all this physical ability that's head and shoulders above anyone else right now. Here you go. The team is yours. The future is yours and then you shine bright for a second and then you fizzle out versus the guy who had to start at the bottom and go, I am going to prove to you that I'm the guy.
Which is actually an advantage we had with Stroud because there was so much doubt to him that it took
Yeah.
away the here's the reins kind of stardom that he had in the
Yeah.
beginning. And so he had to actually come out and prove himself because of that stupid new
Which
IQ
leads us
test.
in which leads us into chapter 7 because there's a little bit of that here with Rand finally kind of getting back with the few people uh who can help him consciously or unconsciously stop being a dictatorial a-hole, which are the clan chiefs, and
Mhm.
specifically Rourke and Bale, because they're Rourke especially are the close ones to him, the ones that introduced him to the Aiel that first, that first followed him, and Rourke especially because he does have that fatherly, you know, is old enough to be grandfatherly. Actually, I don't know if we're ever told he is, but he has that grandfatherly patience that that comes from years of not just years, but years of doing stuff. Because as Nynaeve has she has a thought here somewhere because we chapter 7 is her point of view and it's what she's thinking about Cadsuane, I think, and she has the thought of, she knew well enough from being a wisdom that years alone didn't give you wisdom. She specifically thinks of sin, which incidentally, I found a pretty good pronunciation guide that has um a lot of words from the various glossaries, and sin is not on here. And I've always been curious how you pronounce his last name because I
Wasn't
don't
it
know that I've ever seen a pronunciation guide.
wasn't it was it his name in the original, The Eye of the World?
It might have been, but I couldn't find it here. And my son has my Eye of the World because he was going to start reading it. So,
Hold on.
um, so Sin Buey or Buey. So I've never known if you pronounce that E at the end or because IE is a weird diphthong and does weird things. Um, where is it? Where it has her name? Um, you know what? Another thought I had here reading this is a great show don't tell is Nynaeve's interaction with Daigen. That Nynaeve is far younger than Daigen is, and yet she has the wisdom to recognize all the things you've done, all the things you've seen, and yet,
I forgot Eye of the World is the
uh,
only one that doesn't have a pronunciation
uh,
guide.
oh, so all of the things you've seen, all of that you've done, and you're sitting here teaching me these weaves, and yet the second unaccepted, as she Nynaeve puts it, fresh off of apron strings, walks in the room, you have to defer to talking to Daigen, and that just doesn't make any sense. The way we do things here is wrong, and I love the juxtaposition there of age doesn't necessarily give you wisdom, but sometimes it does because age gives you experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and because Sin has lived in this little bubble, he can be a cantankerous a-hole and get away with it because he
I
lives in this
see
small little bubble.
I see this in class now because I'm talking to these traditional students as I'm a non-traditional student,
And
and
you're the gray beard.
I'm the graybeard, and I would just be spitting stuff out, and they're like, "How do you know so much?" I mean, I have a smart group. We're like the top five of the class in one group. We made sure that happened, uh, and I'm like, it's not intelligence. It's I have 22 extra years of seeing things and
Mhm.
learning things and just coming across things. I mean, yeah, I've read more books than you because yeah, I read slower than you, but I've done it over 44 years instead of your 22. It's that's part of experience. You have just seen things.
Yeah. And so I love all the little things going on here in this little section with Nynaeve and Daigen of years don't necessarily give you wisdom, but in Daigen's case, yeah, they can. If you've been busy doing stuff and you've had to work to get to where you're at, but then again, not necessarily because it takes Nynaeve, it takes her, sometimes there's a wisdom in ignorance because you're going to see things that other people won't because they're locked into the system. And it takes Nynaeve to point out this is silly. How come some novice fresh off of Vapor Trees, just so she's strong in the power, you immediately have to defer to her?
Well, Saki, back to our
There's
beginning
no,
of this this
yeah.
this whole conversation. People are set in their ways, and it's their culture at that point. And when you talk about being set in a culture, and if you really analyze everything within your culture, we can do it here in the States, we can do it in the East, we can do it in Russia, we can do it all over the place. You can probably
Mhm.
take out, without even thinking too hard, about 20 things that everybody just does. That's kind of ridiculous.
Hmm. Uh, I love the back and forth here. The yes, but well, this and that we're talking about here, and there's another great back and forth moment here of Nynaeve. Nynaeve has this wisdom to point out that this structure is nonsense. Daigen can't see it because she's been in it, but she clearly appreciates Nynaeve's outlook because as Nynaeve thinks when she's leaving, oh wait, she called me by my name. I must have gotten through to her. We made a connection there. Um, but then the other part here that Nynaeve has to learn, which is anything short of death should be able to be healed, including your emotional pain. And especially since it has to do with the power, because it has to do with the word of bond, then I should be able to heal it with the power. And so as much as Nynaeve is wise beyond her years, she doesn't get it, and it's you know bittersweet is the best way to describe it here. Of why would I want to take that pain away? Daigen
Yeah,
says.
yeah, and this is actually a very profound lesson that either Sanderson or Jordan or the collective intelligence of the two put in here is pain is a teacher.
Hmm.
The worst, one of the worst afflictions you can be born with is the inability to feel pain. Those people do not live long because they never learn anything. You step on a tack, It doesn't hurt. You just keep walking on the tech. You get an infection, you get gangrene, and your foot comes off. You know, you turn and you slice your hand on, the meat slicer at the deli. You don't even notice. You walk around and you suddenly see blood and you wonder why you're missing a finger. Pain is an important part of life. If we didn't have pain, we would never learn what not to do. And so there's an attachment to it.
And a part of me, part of me wonders how much of this scene was Jordan, because I wonder if it was Jordan, if this was his way of addressing survivor's guilt.
Mm.
Because yeah, one of the biggest, probably the biggest contributing factor to depression and suicidality in combat vets is survivor's guilt. And I wonder if this is Jordan saying, yeah, it hurts, but that pain is part of the joy of having known that man and having had that brotherhood with him. So as much as it hurts, would you really want to take that away if taking it away deprived you of the highs that came before this low?
It it makes the person meaningless if you take the pain away. I mean, I'm
Mm-hmm.
dealing with this right now. I just had the client that passed away, and I'm not talking about myself. There is that there, but his wife is coming back into the gym now. And it's hit and miss because there's days where she just can't bear to be in that room because her and her
Mm-hmm.
husband used to be in that room together. And the stronger the pain, the more you cared. And if you take away the pain, that's also, not to make everything a selfish thought, but these internal things are part of you. You're taking away your caring for that person by taking away the pain because then they become nothing. They became as if you never
Yeah,
met them if
that's
you take away the pain.
yeah. It should hurt. I mean, you want to get to a point where it's a livable hurt,
Hmm.
in the same way that if you have a physical pain, a chronic physical pain, you you never get it to go away, but you do get it to be manageable. And with the emotional pain, as much as I would like to wave a magic wand and make my physical pain go away, I mean, the point of this interaction is if I could do that with the emotional pain, I would be really tempted, but it should hurt because you should miss those people
Hmm.
if they
Now
were
where
if they were really that meaningful.
now where Nynaeve would have a point if she was a more experienced debater is yes, there's still the emotional pain from losing someone, but this warder bond pain is artificial.
Mhm.
You can still mourn, you can still do all of those things, but the part that was
Yeah,
part of the
yeah.
bond, that's artificial.
That makes me wonder if if this is all purposefully part of building up to something that happens, I think, in the next book. Because we go from that to Nynaeve going to Rand and sitting there in the tent where he's at, watching him and you know, thinking about this madness. And again, Nynaeve is the one who is confident that anything short of death should be able to be healed. And she's even thought that about, or she is, especially now with what is going on, she has started to think about that in terms of, she wouldn't like to the analogy, but the parallel with Grendel, which is Grendel was a healer, but not in the way Nynaeve is. She was a healer of the mind.
Hmm.
And now Nynaeve is starting to think about those things as well. Think about that as part of healing. Um, and so we go from her thinking about that emotional pain as being part of healing, and she is a healer, so she should care about this. And now she goes to Rand, and here we go again with the whatever is going on in his mind, I should be able to do something about it. Um,
Which
The
technically, the more we Jordan wasn't there yet, but the more we know about neuroscience, yes, you should.
so page 129 is where I've jumped to, where Nynaeve is sitting and she's watching Rand and thinking about Rand, and I love that this scene is from Nynaeve's point of
Well,
view.
just
Um,
one little nugget before we jump there. 123, when before the conversation about the water bond, they're going through this. Here's the weave. Da, 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 it's
mhm.
useless. I don't understand. That is almost a word for word from New Spring with Moiraine's thoughts, right? So
I hadn't made that connection. Yeah.
Nynaeve is where Moiraine was at that time,
Yeah, we
and
talked
she
about it
very
way
much is
back, but
like
yeah.
that mentally as well.
Nynaeve Nynaeve hates the fact, and I think she started to notice this. I believe we talked about some scenes where she started to notice this before Moraine's death, but she is, and this is in large part why she ends up with Lan. Is that because she's a lot like Moraine,
Hmm.
but different enough that she's more than just a partner to Land. That
Well, but this is why I don't like the concept of blues as people with purposes and with it. What do they call it? They
a cause.
A cause.
They dedicate
Be,
themselves to a cause.
because Nynaeve is dedicated to healing anybody and everybody and finding ways
Hmm.
to do it. That's a cause.
Hmm.
So every yellow has a cause.
Yeah. Yeah, the blue the mantra of the blues I always found odd. I mean, the
Realistically,
whites, they are
there are
wholly dedicated to logic.
there are followers and leaders, and healing is a cause, but you can be a follower or a leader in the cause. And basically, the blues are just all the leaders of every cause. And so
Mm.
Nynaeve is just like Moiraine. She just has a shtick. Where Moiraine's shtick was finding this one person.
All right, so middle of page 129. I found this exchange really interesting. Is Min is in the room, of course. So Nynaeve is looking at her, looking at Rand, thinking about this. Um, I love the, along with the more serious thoughts of what does all this mean for Rand and his psyche and how do I help him, is also this aside of this is just scandalous, of I know he was raised better than this, of carrying on, as they would say, with Min, and why don't you might make an honest woman out of her, is one of the thoughts that's going on in Nynaeve's head. So I love that that is still there along with all this other, but uh, even though they weren't in Emmons Field and she was no longer wisdom, she'd made certain that Rand knew of her displeasure. But then here's where it gets serious. His response had been simple: if I marry her, my death will bring her even more pain. I was curious what you thought about Nynaeve's response inside her own head, because I'd always thought of this as a more masculine idea, and I'll tell you why in a second. More idiocy, of course. Not just wrong, but idiocy. If you were planning to go into danger, then it was all the more reason to get married. Obviously, it's obvious, and it's idiocy that he thinks differently. And what I thought of immediately, because if you watched, when you watched the last episode that will be the next episode, we started off, I was talking about watching the new show Masters of the Air, about the 8th Air Force in World War II, and went on a rabbit trail looking at it, watching interviews from veterans, and what you see a lot from that era is men who were drafted or had volunteered or knew they were going in, and they married their sweethearts before they left. That happened a lot of, well, we knew we were going to get, I was scheduled to be deployed then, you know, in 3 months. So we went ahead and we got married. And it seems odd from our, peaceful, comfortable existence looking back. But I'd always kind of thought of that as the masculine thing of, I want to make sure that I have, as we say, when you think death is approaching, I had my affairs in order. And for a man, part of that is, this is my woman, this is my bride. I'm gonna, make sure that things are as they should be before I leave to go do this manly thing that needs to be done. So I find it interesting coming from Nynaeve that she's the one thinking this.
Well, we've always thought of her as the masculine
Mm-hmm.
because she was raised by a male figure, and so she has some of those tendencies. Uh, I don't know if this is a masculine or feminine thing. I think this is a Rand versus tradition thing
Mm-hmm.
at this point, because in her mind, she's thinking this would prov- the thing about marriage, like I hate to put masculine or feminine on this because the marriage would provide some kind of closure. It would be closure in I want you, but now I'm putting the ring on it. So I am confirming that thought. It's a public display of confirmation of the thoughts you
Mm-hmm.
already have. And she's thinking that would actually bring peace to men because yes, I lost my husband, but he confirmed that he was my husband first.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I lost Rand, who the love was exactly the same as the first scenario I just said, but he never put the ring on it. He never put the closure in on it. He never confirmed that to me. I know what I feel, but I don't know what he feels, which she should with the bond.
And
But I mean, we're speaking of just regular
yeah.
people here. Now, I could speak from my own grandparents. My grandfather was drafted during World War II, and he was dating my grandmother, and he said, "Well, going to war. We'll get married when I get back." That was his marriage proposal. So she waited for him to come back, and they got married. And
Yeah, my grandfather, it was, I believe, they had been dating for, I don't remember how long. Um and I believe they got married um because he was going to flight school. I think it was when they got married. Is before he got tr sent to flight school, they got married. Um at least I'm mostly sure that was the timeline. So they were one of the ones that was quick. But one of the reasons I thought, the masculine feminine thing going back and forth in my head is because you also see the masculine side of what Rand is doing, which we've talked about before, which is
I'm going to protect her from these
the man
negative.
as the
Yeah.
protector. I'm trying to protect her because it will be worse. And
I think where the masculine feminine isn't what you would do, it's the why you would do it.
mm,
And he's not doing it to protect her, which you say is yes, is masculine. But I think Nynaeve is saying that's ridiculous. You should do it because she's thinking of the emotional closure that goes with that.
mm.
Trying to think if we
um
use this meme already. I can find it.
I didn't think about this when I was reading this and just now looking here. When everyone finally gets there and Rand starts his kind of meeting, briefing, planning session with Rourke and Bale and Bashir, and now Cadsuane's here, and the way he treats the clan chiefs, and I hadn't thought about the contrast. And again, to me, this is a little bit of a nitpick and a bit of a failing of the storyline. This is why he needs Avienda, and she's in the room, but she's still in apprentice mode, and so she's not saying anything. Nynaeve wants to talk to her, and Nynaeve gives her a look of not here, not now. We'll talk later. Um, but it just kind of hit me of I think there's supposed to be a clear parallel here between how Rand is treating the Chiefs and what Aviendha said about the Chiefs when Rourke came and gave his uh, report to the Wise Ones.
Wait, that's illegal.
Gasp. Um, Brain fart. Where's my brain? Oh yes. So Aviendha makes the point that when when Rourke comes and he's talking to the Wise Ones about and voices concerns, and Aviendha is insightful enough to see when she's talking to Amos about what it and Amos is basically testing her, and Aviendha is insightful enough to notice and say when Rourke says he's concerned, he is undoubtedly expressing things that others had said, but he doesn't want to bring any shame or impugn their honor, and so he's taking it upon himself as the chief. And that's probably what's happening here when Rourke is telling him when Rand is being grumpy Rand, frustrated Rand, and Rourke tells him, "We haven't been here that long. We need time." And he's probably expressing taking on himself what has been told to him by his subordinates of, we need more time. We haven't had enough time to do these things that you told us to do. And rather than seeing that, Rand just lashes out. And again, Bale kind of reading between the lines, it seems like Bale gets a little bit prickly, but Rourke seems to have an, an infinite amount of grandfatherly patience. And he's willing to give Rand some leeway, some rope, some room to see if he recovers it. Um, I also think we never see this. He never says this. It's one of my um nitpicks is that we never, so far as I know, we never get a POV of him. And I would have loved to have gotten at least a short scene of what's really going on inside Rourke's head, especially when he's with Rand. But it seems to me that Rourke is one of the more understanding of what we spent a while, griping about with Rand and Egwene is he accepts Rand for what he is, which is one of us, but not one of us. One of the hard things for the Aiel to accept is of the blood, but not raised by the blood. Yeah, his father was Aiel, through and through, but he wasn't raised among us. But he's trying. Rourke seems to give Rand a lot of credit for trying, whereas others will get, especially Aviendha, will get all cranky and offended when he, you know, accidentally does something that is contrary to Giotto or embarrassing or faux pas or whatever. Rourke seems to give Rand a lot of credit for trying.
Well, even bottom of page 131, uh, Rand's little apology after Cadsuane snaps his mouth shut. Uh, I apologize, Rourke Bale. It has been a wearing few months. And Rourke says, you have no toe. Uh, it reminds me, you said grandfatherly patience. It reminds me of when I
Mm-hmm.
was living with you guys and I broke a rule in the house and your dad was like, well, we're going to treat this like ignorance now. But if you do it again, it's no longer ignorance. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what it screams at me. Rourke is like you said, he's at least trying. So he's treating these
Mm-hmm.
faux pas as ignorance. But he's probably taking a tally that if
Yeah,
it keeps happening, then you're not trying, you know?
yeah, yeah. Um, I just had a random thought that is amusing to me, and I will share. It's for for all of the stereotypes of Germans and the way they are, I will say one of the more interesting things about living there is Germans were very appreciative if you tried. And my German was never very good. I didn't know a lot of words and I wasn't great at the pronunciation. They were always very appreciative, complimentary, and you did the best you could. Now, and they weren't, you know, embarrassed or
Unless you're
annoyed at
married to
having
their
to.
daughter.
Well, that's
You should know this by now.
father-in-lawness is a universal rule all its own. But here, let me try. Even though I don't speak English very well, you try. Now let me try. And the French are condescending arseholes. If you try and you don't speak like a native speaker, then they're really condescending about you and your crappy French. And now I have to deal with this foreigner and now I have to talk English. That was always one of the more amusing things to me, that for all you know, the the stereotype of the Germans as stiff and lacking in humor, and yet in that way they were so much more open and welcoming than the obnoxious French. And even the Italians, to a degree, they're not nearly as bad as the French, but there was a little bit of that in Italy as well,
Oh, there was a lot of
in
that when
certain
I went to
parts of
Italy.
Italy at
Yeah.
least. Yeah. Um, all right, but then Cadsuane's response is the other interesting thing to me about this exchange, because man, does you cut me deep, Shrek. She's not wrong here, and he really does need someone to tell him this, but I don't think it's an accident that in this scene Nynaeve has that nonverbal exchange with Avienda. I kind of feel like part of the point of this scene is telling us Avienda needs to hurry up and do whatever it is she needs to do to become a full wise one, because he needs her and he needs Avienda in this scene,
Mm-hmm.
because Cadsuane's not wrong to you know give him a nudge in the ribs, but for Rand this isn't a nudge in the ribs. She just kicks him in the nuts.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, Cadsuane said, perhaps you want to stop and think. How often have you known the Aiel to fail you? It should have stopped there, because he was right to be,
Well, she stuck the knife in.
set down.
She stuck the knife
Now
in,
she
and now
twisted
she's
it.
got a twist. Yeah.
How often have you failed, hurt, or offended them? That's exactly why he's acting the way he's acting, Cadsuane. This is where she's so wise, but she still has these big blind spots. And this is why he really needs Avienda right now. He really needs Avienda and Nynaeve to be the ones pulling him back to where he needs to be, creating um that buffer between his worst, between where his masculinity starts to turn toxic. He needs a feminine touch, but a more masculine, a strong feminine touch to pull him back and say, no, no, that's not right. Don't do that. Uh, the only other thought I had on this chapter is I love the end of it. I love that Bashir and Rourke and Bale, that Bashir of all people, he gets the Aiel sense of humor and even seems to like it and seems to be able to joke with it, and Rand just doesn't get it. He's like, I don't, oh, you people aren't right. Um, as my wife says to me, if if I start clamping my hand over my mouth and ducking my head while I'm sitting over here, she starts yelling at me, "Are you being a bad person?" Because the comedy I watch when I'm watching comedy here with my headphones on by myself is because it's really twisted and dark, and I know it's stuff that she would not like. It's not her brand of comedy at all. Um, and so that's her way of responding is, "Are you being a bad person?" I
Yeah,
mean,
maybe.
it's
Define bad.
yeah. We'll stuff you full of straw and put you up on your horse so you can be a pincushion. And Bashir finds that hilarious.
which
And of
I
course,
which I found funny too. I mean, so it's like
yeah,
not just
yeah. And
well, and this is I think a Sanderson thing. He's very surface level, in a lot of the meta ideals that Jordan had. I think Jordan would have wrote that where it would have been a little bit more vague for someone like you and me to read. Like some of the stuff
Yeah,
from
that's a
book
good point.
4 and book 5. I mean, this was actually kind of funny, but it was just like, oh, well, we'll just say something that's a little bit brutal and laughing at death, you know, instead
Hmm.
of the other ones. I was like, okay, I see where he's going with that, but I see said that way would be a particular sense of humor. This one, I mean, it was kind of just funny,
Hmm.
which is good from I'm just reading it and I chuckled, but it's bad from I'm trying to use it as I don't get Aiel humor thing.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Any other thoughts about that before we go to
We got
chapter
well,
eight?
we got
If
9 minutes from your heart out.
oh, that's a good point.
So
Yeah.
so let's not start a whole new chapter. Let's do the quick
And
couple of spoilers we have. But
chapter 8 is a pretty lengthy chapter, so we'll just go ahead and leave it there then. All right. I didn't remember having any spoiler thoughts, and there
uh
weren't any in the comments.
okay, so spoilers
We
here.
already went over the comments.
If you're the first time readers, go ahead and stop here. It's only 8 minutes of action, anyways. It won't hurt our algorithm that much if you stop here.
8 minutes of action. That's impressive. What? Huh?
Robin's death and Lanfear and Moiraine.
Okay. Yeah. I am curious. That's why I said that. And you should put a reply there on that reply,
I did reply.
and, and,
Yeah,
and,
I
uh,
already did.
because I'm trying to think because to me I can't think of any way they are even remotely connected. Ravine and what happened at the docks there with Maureen and
And
Lanfear.
I can blow it up in one with one thought. Moiraine goes to the Genji Tower, uh, and you could make an argument that she resurrected because of the beam, right? But Lanfear dies. She's now Sindane because Lanfear
I
dies.
I am mostly sure she didn't.
She has to be Sindane.
No, well, not exactly. Not in the way you're implying. I am mostly sure we get a Sindane point of view later where you find out where or you infer that basically neither one of them died immediately when they went through the doorway. I am curious why and how the bond got snapped because it didn't obviously get snapped when Moraine walked through the doorway in Tyr because we know she went through the doorway in Tyr. I don't know if we've ever gotten an answer from Harriet or Maria or Sanderson on that particularly, and I doubt Jordan would have said anything about it before he died because we hadn't gotten to the point yet. Well, wait a minute. No, well, he wouldn't have had
No,
time because he
she
died
remember
pretty soon
Moiraine
after
had
Knife
more
of
had
Dreams.
foresight. There's an easy answer to that. She cut her
Yes,
bond.
but it's gone immediately,
She
and
passed it to
and
Myro. Passing a bond, it's done. She it would be like he's no longer
that's a good
bonded to her.
point. We don't know.
She just could all she has to do is just hit the weave.
We don't know mechanically how that works. But that's that how did I never think of that until now of wait a minute, why is Lan acting like a warder who's lost his Aes Sedai when the bond didn't break exactly, it transferred. So how much of that is the breaking of the warder bond and how much of that is Lan just
Mourning.
becoming fatalistic after how much of that is just Lan mourning? Man, there's something I've never thought of before, and I don't know how I never did. Is why is he acting like this? Because and it's not like we've seen before. Uh, in fact, we we get a little bit of it because Myril is pressured into taking the bond of one of the Saladar Aes Sedai, who's murdered by, we find out later, Halima. And so one of those warders is still alive, and Myril is pressured into bonding him. And they don't understand why, and it's because they don't know that Myril already has Lan's bond, so she's already got more than she wants. So we do see there is a difference between your bond was severed and now you have a new bond, but the pain of that severing is there. It's just thought that, especially among the Greens, that if you rebond, it helps you get over that breaking. But this should be something different.
Well, but except that Moiraine could sever her bond.
But we don't know how that
She's like I said, she's
works.
got foresight.
And I wouldn't
She could
think
she wants everybody to think she's dead for the fate that she knows that's going to happen to work out. Remember, she's seen all her
yeah.
projected lives because she's gone through the rings in Rhuidean.
And she
So
knows there is a chance. And we know from, because I
so
take that
part of
back.
that convincing people that she's dead is Lan's basically misery from having
That's a
been
good point.
severed from the bond.
We don't know how that works. And I would assume that an Aes Sedai releasing the bond wouldn't have the same psychological effects that the hard cut of her death would be, but we don't know how it works. And again, Lan doesn't act exactly like a warder who's, but then when he gets back with Nynaeve, he is still really, like, I mean, I think we could safely say clinically depressed.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not himself. He's not who he was before this happened, which makes me wonder mechanically what exactly happened there.
Well, I mean,
But I was gonna say we
there's some
do know for a fact that she's alive, because I forgot that it was Knife of Dreams when Tom handed Matt the letter and
yeah,
said, read it.
there's also something to be said about being cut off from this world. Going through the doorway in the stone, the door was always open. This time
And
the
the
door
door was
melted.
broken. This
The door
Yeah, yeah,
the link was broken, so she is not in this world anymore.
yeah.
And
No,
so
she's not.
that might sever the bond.
Well, no, but not just from being in the world. I think it would have had to have something to do with the destruction of the doorway,
Mhm.
because she,
Well, yeah,
as I
that's what I
said,
mean. There's no open connection.
yeah,
There's no open connection
she
anymore.
that's a good point. She walked through the door, but that door was still there.
Hmm.
So um I've been rewatching Stargate, and so there's some sort of, in the same way they can radio between the wormhole in Stargate, there must have been something like that happening. Um oh, the thought about Sindane, I'm 99.99% sure that a little bit later we get a point of view from hers, and you discover that Lanfear didn't die immediately, but whether on purpose or on accident, the way she bargained with the Islefin or Eelfin or whoever it was to get out involved her dying.
Mm.
That's why she's in a new body.
And then you had some thoughts on Ishi.
Crap, what were they? When did I say that?
I was talking about nihilism, and you said, "Oh, I've got big thoughts on that," and da 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 for spoilers because of the different way Rand and him are handling things.
Oh, no, that was, yeah, but that was more about, read and find out, because we'll get there in a minute. It's the contrast, because we know, and this is why the rereads are so great, is that knowing who Balsamon is and who Rand is and was, and then rereading what he says in The Eye of the World and The Great Hunt is so much more interesting and eye-opening when you know um when you know this history they have. as people, not as archetypes, not as the avatar of the Dark One and the avatar of the Pattern, but as people, the what must have happened between Ishamael and Lews Therin in the Age of Legends, and having known each other before, and these deep-seated philosophical differences. And we're going to see when Rand finally gets out of rock bottom and he has this epiphany that kind of reintegrates himself with himself. And then going forward in these last three books, then I think it'll be interesting to see, to make the contrast of how this never happened with Ishamael, because you brought up the point there when we were talking about it. As usual, Ishamael is the ultimate Nietzschean, except he's like the Nazi Nietzschean, because Nietzsche gets this bad rap because the Nazis loved him. Well, except the Nazis twisted and distorted Nietzsche to further their own ends.
Yeah, and it's
Uh,
I'm really, as we read more and more, and as I've read more Nietzsche between the last time I read these books and then this little reread and go through. I'm beginning to think Jordan was kind of a fan, uh, and he actually put a twist on him to finish the book out. It's the old fighting the evil. Be careful you don't become the evil that you fight. Stare into the
mhm.
abyss long enough and it stares back. Rand does become Morden,
Yes.
but
Yeah,
Morden
that
takes on the
that
good
is
traits of
that is
Rand.
part of what I was thinking about
It's
when
it's
I
it's
yeah,
not
that
what
is part
Nietzsche
of what I was
says
thinking
that you
about when I didn't
become
want
the
to spoil
demon.
it.
He became the demon, but the demon became him.
Hmm.
And yeah. So it's
Yeah, and Ishi is the one who, wait, Nietzsche said you share too long in the abyss and you become the abyss. Cool, let me go do it. No, he wasn't saying that as a how-to manual. It's like 1984 wasn't an instruction manual, people.
it
It's
seems
yeah,
that way
yeah, yeah,
sometimes. Yeah.
exactly. So the contrast, but the similarity, is interesting to me, between you know and I'm glad you brought up that point about Nietzsche, because I think that'll come up again and again here, as Rand, well, when does it happen here? We're getting close to the point where Rand hits rock bottom, right? Where Rand stared into the abyss and then fell into the abyss. Okay. But then Rand finished reading the book, and that's how he gets out, because Rand finished reading, and Ishamael stopped at, become the monster. Cool, get it. No, wait, I'm not done. Keep reading, damn you.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll end this on little Douglas Murray. It's not whether you're a fan of Nietzsche or not that determines your character. It's a matter of what parts of Nietzsche you like.
Yes. Yeah. 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 Um, oh man, where was it? I'll see if I can find it for you. I went on a Douglas Murray rabbit hole about a month ago, and I found a video of him talking with someone who's like one of the foremost, a German professor who's like one of the foremost experts on Nietzsche. Uh, and who was the guy? There was a guy before Nietzsche who was kind of his, uh one of his inspirations.
Dostoevsky?
Anyway,
Oh no, that might be
yeah,
after.
it was like it was a 90 minutes of, man, I need to find it again, because it's one of those, I knew when I was listening to it, I'm gonna have to listen to this a second time, because we're getting deep here. So I'll
It,
see if I can find it and we can
you
talk
can go
about
down
it,
some
and
serious
maybe
rabbit holes
post
with
it later.
Dostoevsky.
Yeah, yeah,
Every time I hear some
yeah,
of his stuff, I think of you. Just like, yeah.
yeah. All right. Well, we'll get even more philosophical next time, probably, because that's where you go with these last three books, really, when you've reread them, you know even if it's your second read, your first reread, but definitely if you've read them a couple times, that's when you really start to see the philosophy, especially in these last books, of reading past the events, looking past the events, and seeing the why of what's going on, that to me, that's where it really starts to get interesting.
Yeah, I might have to go read some John Stuart Mill or Steven Pinker or something just to get some positive philosophy for a few seconds before I start doing my homework.
Yeah, because it's gonna be a minute before we get positive in this in these
Yeah,
last three
I'm gonna hit
books.
a chapter of Better Angels Over Nature or something.
All right. Well, we will see y'all Wednesday with something. I mean, maybe
Well,
the end of the world for all we know.
dependent on if we get a strike on that one spot. If you don't see us till next Saturday, that means bad news. Uh,
Yep. Yep.
but if you see us Wednesday, that or if you see part two of what I'm going to put up, that
Yeah.
means we got away with it. So we were trying to
All
skirt the
right.
line, and the problem with algorithms is that it's
I
looking for
jumped over
certain.
the line a few times,
Yeah,
but
it's searching for certain words, not actually what the concept you're
mm,
talking about
mm,
is. So yeah, we'll go with it. I'll post 1 and 3 up. I'll post this up, and then I'll post 2. So at least everybody has this.
yeah. All right. We'll see y'all then.
All right, later.